I believe we have you have a landfill update. Councilman Spears would like to do that now, right? Okay. Can we do that, please?
Lockwood's going to get
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. As far as an update of the landfill over what was reported at the last council meeting, we continue to aggressively repair and upgrade the water or leachate collection system at the landfill and the gas collection system. Contractors have replaced thousands of linear feet of leachate collection line and are in the process of final upgrades to the two pumping stations. As we remove water, the ultimate goal is to increase the pull of gas from the landfill, which will then ultimately decrease the fugitive emissions from the landfill.
When was the last time DEQ was out there?
DEQ, well, we haven't had an inspection, but DEQ representatives Brian Tusa and Mike Allegro with Dr. Raul Retard visited the landfill on September 12th. Specifically, Dr. Retard wanted to go around the landfill and get his own personal feeling about the odors of the landfill. What they wrote at their exit interview was, quote, "At the time of the site tour, normal landfill odors were noted when downwind of the active working phase." They also requested some documentation, which was provided the next day to DEQ agent Wayne DeSales.
Did they have any parts per million? What was the reading on that day when they were out there?
There were no readings taken by the DEQ people.
Is that normal? I thought.
Again, I believe this was a courtesy to Dr. Retard. They basically conducted a drive-through visit of the landfill.
I don't know about other offices, but I can speak for mine. Also, when I went to, no, I'm sorry, I didn't go. But I went to, members of my staff was at the Wagaman Civic Association meeting last week, and that was the entire discussion. Was they were complaining about the smell. We continue to receive the complaints. I just want to know and just feel comfortable that everything is being done, because I know my office received the phone calls all during the day. On my way here, I received a phone call. So that's just something that's very concerning, and it will continue to be concerning until the smell or until the complaints go away.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Johnston?
I, too, am receiving calls, and it's been very active for over a year now. And I know I'll tell my constituents when they call, I tell them that we're doing everything we can in our landfill to correct the problem we've had. My question is, and I always ask the question, they ask me the same question, is how do we allow this to get to this point over these years this has been going on? And I can't give them an answer for that. All I can tell them is that we're trying to correct the problem right now. We spent over $2 million in the past couple of months trying to do improvements. Today we are approving the new company to come in to take over the environmental job at the landfill. So that's going to be another move forward. Last night I had calls. A lady called me up. She walked out of the house. She said the smell was horrible. And that was last night. And her husband, who has a wind director on his roof, on the top of his roof, he took a picture. The roof, the wind director was pointing to the river. So that tells me that the wind was blowing towards the landfill and not away from the landfill.
Yes, sir.
So here we have a smell last night. And the wind director shows the wind's blowing to the landfill, and the smell was bad. So we have situations of our landfill is a problem, but we got problems other places, and we need to find out where these other problems are. It's getting bad. I'm getting complaints from people in Kenner are calling me. People I know in Kenner complaining. We don't know what's going on. I mean, it's getting worse and worse. And I know we're trying to correct our problem, But we're all. I know Dominic and I'm getting calls. I mean, from people. It's just. I know Jennifer. I know for a fact Jennifer's getting calls. I have people living in a district call me too about the problem and the smell. We're getting the calls from Old Jefferson now. I mean, it's all over. So it can't be just our landfill doing this. It's got to be some other problems, and we need to find out what it is because it's getting worse. But thank you. I know y'all doing what you can on the landfill, and hopefully we move it in the right direction with this new company we're bringing in to do the environmental and correct the problems that we're having. Thank you.
Councilman Robert?
Is there any reasonable explanation as to why these smells are just occurring at night?
I think the weather conditions at night may have something to do with it. There's certainly activities that go on at night that don't go on during the day when we talk about, or activities that go on all through the night, specifically the midstream loading operations in the river and so forth. But
how cooperative have they been in providing information about what they are loading and unloading at their site?
I can't answer that. We have no jurisdiction over them. That is a DEQ issue.
Guard required to keep a manifest of what they're.
I would imagine they are. Yes,
have we
sir.
requested that?
My department has not. No.
So, do you know if emergency management has requested that, or are we notified? Mr. Valianti, I'm sorry, if you could.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is that do we have an idea of what Mid-Marine is loading and unloading at their site, and is there a manifest kept of what is being taken on and off of the vessels that are docked at that location?
To answer your question is yes, there is a manifest, and the Customs has control of those manifests, and everything has to be registered with Customs prior to any ship entering the Mississippi River from the Gulf, or if it's loaded upriver and it is headed downriver
Do
toward.
we have access to that, or do we have?
We are in the process of making that happen.
We have not received so far any documentation.
We have not, and so we're going to make some specific requests as it relates to barges that are ships that are carrying chemicals and commodities such as grain or anything that could possibly spoil. And so we want to make sure that we target our requests appropriately. Also, the administration is also working on some monitoring systems, and we're working closely with the riverboat pilot associations in terms of setting up cameras at various buoys, especially that are located right off of River Ridge and Harahan area, where they're unloading a tremendous amount of grain, especially at night. So we're putting those plans together. We're working closely with Communications and Jeb Tate to make sure that that information will tie into our scatter system, and then we'll be able to have some warning devices where, just like when a canal starts to overflow or if a pump goes down, we'll know immediately if there's any dust in the air that's being kicked up by these grain operations that are occurring. But to answer your question, yes, we are aware that we have to get that manifest. Customs is the organization that we're working with now, or the agency that we're working with now. So that issue is in the process.
Would it be a situation where we have to make a FOIA request routinely, or do you think that they would be in a circumstance where they would just share that with us?
Well, they'll share it with us.
On an ongoing
That's
basis.
not an issue. We had a emergency management.
Not to, if they'll share it with us. I'm not being critical. I just want to understand why don't we have it yet?
Be honest with you, there was never a need at this point. So we don't have any specific jurisdiction over the river. That falls under the Coast Guard. We met with the Coast Guard yesterday, as a matter of fact, and we made that request. We made them aware of that need for us to get that manifest, and they're going to reach out to Customs for us, and they're going to we're going to set up a protocol or a standard operating procedure where we're going to get a weekly or a monthly report of what's coming into the river.
And I would suggest that, and I don't know I think we probably should have made that request some time ago because, I mean, there's been some discussions that this could be related to both the combination of what's going on the river and what's going on at the landfill. The other thing I would suggest is that equally, since it is a federal jurisdictional issue, then we need to engage the congressional offices and the senators, if we have not done so already, so that they understand the importance of us getting cooperation from those agencies to try and get this information.
I feel confident that we're not going to have any issues at all collecting that information and collecting it on a regular basis. But you have to recall, July 19th was when we started this operation in terms of the Odor Task Force.
Sure.
And we've been collecting information on a daily basis, and I know the council's been receiving those reports via Director Lockwood's office. And Jeb Tate has been instrumental in working with the GIS maps to make sure that we get the wind directions correct, the ambient air conditions, humidity, things of that nature. But Councilman Johnson, to address your question about the wind, it's a great question. So the atmospheric conditions or the weather conditions that we have at this time of year are not associated with fronts. So it's not a direct line of wind that's coming from point A to point B and then out into the Gulf or out toward the Gulf Coast. So what you get is a high pressure system or a low pressure system that develops around the area, and you start getting wind that comes in from a certain direction, but because it's not associated with a front, what has a hard push behind it, what happens is that anything that wind hits, like a building, like even a river, anything like that, it affects the direction of the wind and it causes vortices. When we met with the riverboat pilots, they were telling us what they think is happening. And these are people that make their livelihood on understanding what the winds and the currents are doing on the river. As the gases rise from the landfill, as it goes over the river, it actually cools off and it drops down as much as 200, 300, 400 feet. That would explain why River Ridge and Harahan take such a hit every time the wind's coming from the southwest or from a westerly direction. So it's coming from the landfill. It rises because it's heated all day long. So in the afternoon, late evening, that's going to occur. As it hits that river, the air there is cooler and it actually drops and it comes down lower where the residents can actually smell it. That would also explain why it's extremely temporary, because once it diffuses, it goes away. Now, we made numerous scenes that we've made. We've had people a block away or two. We smell it, we log the time, and then 10 minutes later, it's gone. So it's a very tricky problem to track. But I will say that we have noticed that the data supports in those graphs that we send you that when we have rain after 3 p.m. until about 7 or 8 p.m., that seems to reduce the amount of complaints, if not completely eliminate complaints for that day. So we know that the rain also is another factor involved. So it's a complicated issue. We are collecting the data, Councilman Roberts, and we continue to make steps forward to the next problem. And
so let me ask you this: if the rain is doing that as temporary relief, is there any benefit to irrigating from an aerial irrigation the landfill sites to try and, I mean, if the water itself can hold the gases down?
We have a misting system at the landfill, sir, that is in operation with a odor neutralizing compound. Just last week, the landfill operator established another 1,000 linear feet to the misting system, so that system is in place. Yes, sir.
So, I also want to add, and this is important, that we understand that we've got Cornerstone Chemical Company that is only 3 or 4 miles away from that area, and also we have the activity that goes on the river itself, which is in that particular bend there's a tremendous amount of loading and unloading of chemicals and commodities like grain. So we definitely feel that it's a combination of the three, especially the way the odors are occurring during the wind. So another issue that I want to address is that we're planning to use EMPG grant money from the state to buy additional wind meters that we're going to put along the fire stations in Harahan and River Ridge, which is going to give us more data points for wind. So you're going to have the wind blowing from the south-southwest in one block, and 6 blocks later it might be coming from the west. Again, that'll give us additional information to pinpoint where these odors could be originating from. But I believe that based on what I've seen on the data, it's a combination of the river and possibly the landfill too. So.
And again,
Okay. Councilwoman Van Branken?
also because I represent Metairie, Old Metairie, and Bucktown, not near the landfill, not as close to the river. Don't forget the rail line, because again, a lot of rail traffic moves through that area. There are a lot of cars that have release valves. So, excuse me, much to what Councilman Johnson was saying, if we can arm our citizens, I think we're getting the calls because everyone has a bit of a heightened awareness about smells in their neighborhoods. If we can arm them with some information. I was at a good meeting just about 2 weeks ago, and there was some information presented about rail car activity, about release valves, about, again, documenting maybe the time you're smelling something, what that smell is, maybe if you're aware if there is a train moving through the area, calling 911, having people be able to check it out in a timely manner. So if there's also the ability to arm our citizens with what they should do to provide us with better information, to arm us with something to help in this process, that would be great.
Councilmember Van Rankin, it's interesting that you brought that up. I spoke with Drew Tessier he's the Public Information Officer with Union Pacific last week, and they are in the process of forming a task force with all the regional railroads, including the New Orleans Public Belt. And exactly what you just asked for, that's exactly what we're going to do. We've already assigned one of our person, Kevin Woods, one of our emergency coordinators. He will be a member of that committee. But I also learned that any chemicals that are toxic in nature or extremely hazardous to the public are only assigned home run shots. So that means once they enter the metro area, they're given priority and they run straight through. Those cars are not allowed to stop. Now, there's always a possibility what happened about 15 years ago in New Orleans where one of the cars could derail, and then it becomes a problem. But the whole purpose of this committee will be to establish some type of emergency alert system via a website or Facebook or whatever other social media they can employ, and let people know when dangerous chemicals are coming through, and if there's a problem, if one of those cars becomes detained or stopped or derailed. So we're looking at that also.
Councilman Impastato?
If I could ask for some clarification, because now I'm a little confused, and it's probably my fault, but I thought, Mr. Lockwood, you explained that the emissions from the landfill were under control and that we're not having emissions from the landfill, but then Mr. Valiente seems to suggest that, in fact, what is being detected in River Ridge and Harahan is from the landfill by virtue of some river jumping mechanism or something like that. Which one is it?
Well, first of all, I didn't say
Okay.
the emissions were under control. I apologize if I gave that impression.
I might have misunderstood.
What I said is that we were continuing the improvements and the repairs to the infrastructure with the ultimate goal to get the gas, any fugitive emissions of gas from the landfill under control. That is the ultimate goal, but we have not achieved that as of yet. Work still continues. And I would please, reiterate that there are 3 active landfills over there side by side and a total of 5 in very close proximity surrounding that area on the West Bank.
It's solely ours. It's any odor emanating, and then, like he's just said, it could be any odors that could be emanating from the river also, and any of the chemical plants over there. And as Councilman Johnson just said, and that's what we've been trying to tell DEQ. There's obviously a problem because even when the wind direction doesn't come from the landfills, we're still getting an odor.
That gets back to the central point, which has been for a couple of months now, is that with the wind direction, as Councilman Johnson explained, would seem to defy the logic that it would be coming from the landfill. But I just want, and maybe I misunderstood. It just
We
seemed
agree
like
with you on that.
two different things were kind of being communicated. I mean, I want to know if we have emissions coming from the landfill that are problematic or abnormal, beyond what is normally associated with just a normal landfill. Then I wanted to know that, and I didn't gather that from the presentation. That's all I was really trying to figure out is
Look,
what was going on.
I had a call yesterday from a lady in River Ridge whose parents live right on the river, and she lives right on the other side. And she says, my dad has told me time and time again, this is some type of chemical odor. It is, again, it's coming in their house. It stays in the house. And she says, we've never smelt anything that we believe is associated with the landfill. This is a chemical odor. So those are the types of documentation we get, and we've been forwarding those on the DEQ to investigate those times and those when that
And on that,
takes place.
I had a meeting with State Representative Stagney, who's going to somehow be involved in the meeting with DEQ, the Senate hearing with DEQ, and we talked about some questions that they want to ask and some demands that they're going to place on DEQ for air monitoring and hopefully to be able to trace those odors as well to determine all of those issues. And just to clarify something else, I have not gotten calls. Now maybe Kenner residents are calling other councilmen. Now I can't speak to that. The only calls I've gotten have been from River Ridge, Harahan, but not from Kenner residents. So just for y'all's purposes in terms of studying, not saying it's not going on in Kenner, but they might be telling somebody else about it and not me. So I'm not aware of that, other than one email I got, but it turned out it was actually Veolia sewerage issue in Kenner. So nothing having to do with this. But anyway, thank you.
Councilman Spears?
But I want to just be clear, on August 31st, they had an inspection by DEQ, and DEQ went to our landfill, and they said at some point it was detected it was 3,000 parts per million. So, I mean, it is clear that we do have some problems, and we continue to have problems. That's why we're doing all the work.
Those readings were taken directly inside a gas pipe itself, where you would certainly expect to have high readings of gas. DEQ regional supervisor Mike Allegro pointed out to me when they were at the facility on 9/12 that DEQ absolutely does not have any regulatory authority about the gas that's within the pipe.
But I saw on the ground, they had bubbling up.
I saw that too.
And that was at our landfill.
And absolutely, yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I mean, we do have problems out there.
No question. We were the first ones to raise our hand and say that we have infrastructure issues at the landfill. No question. Never have denied it. I think we put ourselves in a position of low-hanging fruit at that point, to be honest. But we have infrastructure problems at the landfill that is inhibiting the efficient and effective collection of gas. And that is what we're targeting with the repairs.
I remember at one point we were only collecting 20-30%. What are the collections now? Do we know? Are we still trying to figure that out? But what percentage of gas is being collected?
I don't have that data right now. There are some changes in the infrastructure of the landfill that would allow us to. Those data were
it's been a few
guesses, but again, everything we're doing right now is to improve the efficiency of gas collection.
Just one thing I'd like to say.
Councilman Johnston?
First thing, it's gotten so bad. I'm having people call my office and tell me that they hate to do it, but they're going to sell their house and move across the lake. I've had more than one person tell me that. So, I mean, it's getting to a point, and like I said, I can go back. I know we're trying to correct the problem, but we got to get DEQ more involved with whatever they got to do to find out where all this odor is coming from. When we get our house intact and we take care of our house, if we have odor, we need to get out there and find where it's at. I had a lady walking the levee the other day. She told me she smelled it on a levee. She walked the block, then she didn't smell it. Then she walked another block, she smelled it again. She walked another block. She didn't smell it. She said it's in spots. But this is now affecting, well, it's been affecting the quality of life of our citizens. And we need to do everything in power. And I know we are as an administration. I'm not saying the administration is not. I know you're out there working real hard to correct the problem. But we need to really get this thing taken care of. Because now it's affecting people where they want to move out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Anybody else, Mr. Valiente?
I want to say one last thing, and this is important. Over the weekend, I received information from the company that's going to be working with us as far as tracking the various types of freighters and the cargoes that they're going to be carrying that we're going to verify through customs. And they noticed, based on videos and based on the information that we've been sending them, that that there's a large amount of activity between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. as it relates to unloading grain at the location at Wood and Company, which has the 4 river buoys where these grain freighters dock and where they unload. So we just received the information. We really haven't had a chance to disseminate it, but initially there seems to be a strong cause and effect relationship that these odors are being, they appear to have some effect on the odor that's being smelled in River Ridge and Harahan during these hours, which kind of leads to the question, why does it only happen in the evening? So, but again, we haven't collected enough data on that to say emphatically, yes, we think it's that. But there appears to be some strong evidence now that this activity between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. is when a lot of these complaints occur. So we're still collecting data. It's a complicated problem. You're talking about riverboat pilots, Coast Guard, and Customs. And navigating those 3 organizations are not easy. We're doing it, and so, but it's going to take a while longer for us to figure this out and completely understand the nature of this problem.
Joe, since you brought that up, I was going to mention it earlier, but I didn't. I was told by some people that work the river that the activity on the river is 7 times more than it was a year and a half ago because of the possibility, what's going on with the tariff coming in, and China's over here buying all our grain and everything they can buy right now. And I'm being told that the river is very active with loading grain and other products. And so that's what they
The Coast Guard actually confirmed that and said that the activity for the grain loading has increased tremendously, almost around the clock, and that
this has ever been.
Well, and that's another part of the problem because those barges are being loaded improperly because they're moving so quickly. Again, part of our plan to mitigate that is to put cameras on there so we can have real-time video and information on that. But again, all that takes time to put together. It has to be tied in with communications, and it's a complicated process. We want to make sure that we do it right.
Well, the barges that are there, after they unload the barges, do they clean the barges there, or they take them away?
Mike Lockwood would probably be better because I don't understand the exact mechanism of how they decontaminate those barges. There is a process that I've been told, but then they use several different types of chemicals that they use, but I don't know what chemicals they're using there or if the individual freighters or barge companies, there are a certain number of chemicals that are allowed by the EPA to decontaminate those grain barges, but I don't know which ones they're using. And I'm not even sure if the fumes from those chemicals.
We'll try to get somebody here to answer that question.
Mike says no. Yeah.
That somebody that knows how that process is done.
What you're saying about cameras, and we've discussed, Mark and I have discussed about why can't we put cameras on the river to see, but we don't have any jurisdiction on the river. That's what they're telling us. I mean, we can't do that. So maybe you can get the feds or the Coast Guard or whoever it is to maybe put, like you mentioned, putting cameras up there to see what's going on the river. You know, because we've been told we can't do it because that's not our jurisdiction. So
well, we can set up cameras and we can look and
can you get into over the levee? Can you get down there and see what's going on? We
spoke with the Coast Guard on that yesterday, and the Coast Guard wants to sit down and they want to develop a plan or protocol that we can use. So the Coast Guard received a new commandant for the New Orleans area. He's very proactive. He's been to every Homeland Security meeting. He's been to every emergency management meeting. And he seems like he's going to really want to work with us and solve this problem. He is, in fact, aware of it.
Councilman, to answer your question, though, at the next council meeting, we should have a contract up for this council to select a group that has the infrastructure on the river that Mr. Lockwood was talking about, Mr. Valiente referred to, that'll have cameras, real-time feed, and have all the data and on every freighter and every barge that comes into the river. We had a presentation by them last week, and we're going to nail down that contract and have it before this council so that we will have that intelligence.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Now is the time for persons wishing to appear before the council regarding a resolution on the agenda or the addendum agenda item, and I will